When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Hello everyone, my name is Jose from Man-Made Survival. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel and watching this video. So what I want to talk about today is everything that's going on in the economy right now, because new unemployment numbers have come out. You know, the government is spending a lot of money. Some governors are doubling down on the lockdowns and actually extending them, which is creating a lot of anger in people because they want to reopen the economy. The places that do reopen, you know, they have strict conditions for restaurants and other places to open, which of course, under those conditions, no one can operate for real. And we still have problems with food shortages. More than likely, we're going to go to war with China and Russia. So we have a lot of problems going on right now in the United States. So 2020 by far has been the worst year in natural disasters and man-made as we have seen in a very, very long time, you know. So the focus today is going to be our economy, because I see ourselves going the direction of Venezuela because of all the money that's been printed lately and the second round of stimulus checks that they're planning on sending. They have not passed the bill, and they actually have different other bills that they want to vote on. And that's what we're going to get into today. But first, I want to share with you an article that a guy named Jose from Venezuela wrote about the hardships he was facing when he was there. All right, so here's the first headline. How I survived in Venezuela during the worst societal collapse. This from survivaldan101.com. With a second child on the way in already difficult times, I was thinking every moment about the safety of my family. I started to become a prepper, solving one possible scenario after another and having a logical approach. I started thinking about what would happen if my newborn would have a fever. If it's raining and the lights go off. This is a daily occurrence, by the way. But what if it would take several days to get back? How would I solve that? First, I would need a power generator, flashlights, batteries, and some candles to save the batteries. Easy enough, so I did that. Then I would need some fuel to run that generator. Done that as well. Then we need more foods with high expiration date, a larger freezer. Done. That leads to a new storing room that we had built to store all our goods and so on. You can understand how one thing leads to another, and I became a prepper without having that thought in my mind, or that thought in my head in the first place. All this was happening in a normal, modern country, not the Venezuela you know today when I write this article. I cannot thank God enough for putting all those thoughts and concerns into my head and help me to overcome them and prepare a little. I started very late, it's true, but what I managed to do saved our life. I wish I would have started a lot earlier, and that would give me more time to do more things that would be very handy right now. When the food shortages started to happen, things were pretty much normal. We had a lot of people with weight issues from eating too much. Now we have infant deaths from not eating at all. Things went worse faster than you can imagine. It all started with the oil sales drop and a crash economy that had been hidden for too long up until the point it could no longer be hidden anymore, amid huge debt and political turmoil marked by severe hyperinflation and food scarcity. If you don't know, the Venezuela government runs a food rationing system to cope with the food shortage. Most of the looting and unrest comes from lacking food. For some of the people, food shortages was somehow to be expected, and they're prepared for it. But for the most part of the Venezuela population, it was a shock. They were unaware of what is happening, and when things they had been taken for granted started to run out, they had no idea what else to do in order to be able to eat and survive. Looting and killing became part of their everyday life. You know, but what he shared is very concerning, you know, very powerful, because they did not expect it to happen. You know, from what I just read, is it not pretty close to the same things we're seeing today? And let me remind you, if it wasn't because the Fed is here in the United States and they're pretty much printing, you know, the economy into oblivion, it would have collapsed a long, long time ago, because you cannot borrow, into multiple generations to come. We're spending money from 2 or 3 generations from now. All right. So the path that we're sustaining right now is going to collapse one day, and more than likely it's going to look like Venezuela at the end of the day. Now, remember, in previous podcasts, I shared how one carton of eggs costs 400,000 bolivares. That's their dollar. So can you imagine paying $400,000 for eggs? Because all this money printing creates inflation. All right. So now we're having big problems with unemployment. And the reason being is because states are closed and they have extended the lockdowns. And then the place who are reopening, they have strict rules for the restaurants and other places are opening, which does not allow them to be capacity, which that generates all that revenue. When it's only cut to a fourth, you cannot operate. Even though people are desperate to get back to work, if they cannot function normally, it's going to collapse either way. All right, it's just prolonging it a little bit more, and it's going to make it a little more painful. All right, so here's my next headline. Weekly jobless claims total 2.981 million, bring coronavirus tally to 36.5 million. This from CNBC.com. The total 2.981 million new claims for unemployment insurance filed last week brought the coronavirus crisis total to nearly 36.5 million, by far the biggest loss in U.S. history. The Labor Department reported a loss of 20.5 million jobs in April. That brought the unemployment rate to 14.7%, both post-World War II highs. The insured unemployment rate, which is a simple computation of those filing claim against the total size of the workforce, rose 0.3 percent points to 15.7%. All right, so they're using the number of 14.7%, but in reality, the unemployment is much higher because of different things that they have not included into it, which is my next headline. U.S. jobless rate likely much higher than 14.7%, Labor Department says. This from newstrust.org. Millions of U.S. residents were counted as employed in April despite having no job, suggesting April's true unemployment rate was closer to 20%, much higher than the official 14.7% reported. The Labor Department said Friday the jobless rate should have included people on temporary unpaid leave, furloughed because of the coronavirus pandemic, the government said. But responses to the survey by which the data was collected showed 11.5 million people were categorized as employed but absent from work because of vacation, parental leave, or other reasons, but including 8.1 million absent for unspecified reasons, a group that usually numbers about 620,000. Quote, one assumption might be that these additional 7.5 million workers should have been classified as unemployed on temporary layoff, end quote. A note attached to the government's job report Friday said. If they had been classified as such, the note said the jobless rate would have come in at 19.5%. All right, so they're saying it's 19.5% if you really put those into perspective. But what I want to point out as well is that the true unemployment number would be a lot higher because the number of people who work 30 hours or more in the workforce is actually 110 million people, which 36.5 million people unemployed would bring that unemployment number a lot higher than what they're saying. Probably closer to 40%, or at the very least 30%, which is a lot worse than 14.5. It's double that. So I don't know if they're doing it on purpose so people don't freak out, or maybe that they're not considering all these extra things that go into the formula. I don't know. But the point is that things are actually worse than what they seem. So So that's why we have to pay attention, because one of the things that Venezuela was suffering was a lot of unemployment. All right, so here's my next video, or excuse me, my next headline. Nearly 40% of low-income workers lost their job in March. This from CNN.com. I have a video for that. Here it is.
The new unemployment numbers just in, weekly jobless claims, they paint a full, grim picture of the last 2 months. CNN chief business correspondent Christine Romans with the breaking details. Romans.
2 months of pandemic layoffs totaling 36.5 million layoffs or furloughs. Last week, another 2.981, just a remarkable number. Again, these numbers have been slowing a little bit each week, but are still devastatingly big numbers. And when you look within these numbers, you see retail layoffs, hotel, restaurants, bars. The Fed chief yesterday giving this statistic that of the households in February that were earning $40,000 a year or less, 40% of those households lost a job in March, and those job losses have continued pretty steadily here, John.
All right, so with 40% of low-income workers losing their job, what is going to happen? They're gonna lose their livelihood. You know, they're gonna lose their home if they have one. They can lose their apartment. They can lose their car, and all that goes into the national debt, which, you know, keeps increasing. All right, so here's my next headline for the people who are having trouble with paying your mortgage. Here it is. Delinquent mortgages spike in April amid pandemic, study shows. This from yahoo.com. The number of delinquent mortgages backed by federal agencies jumped by 500,000 in April, according to a study by Inside Mortgage Finance, a financial news and statistics company. Delinquent mortgages backed by Ginnie Mae, which includes FHA and VA loans, surged the most, more than doubling to 818,657 in April from 352,392 loans in March. Overall, 7.02% of the 11.7 million Ginnie mortgages were 30 to 60 days past due. The delinquency numbers may also include those who have applied for forbearance. All right, so 30 to 60 days past due, you know, that simply breaks down to 1 to 2 months past due. If we remember, if we go all the way back to March, you know, they send the first round of stimulus checks that a lot of people have not received, but that gave enough people that gave enough money to some people to be able to pay their rent for that month, you know, which would have been April, even though 30% could not pay. Now we're into May. That makes it 60 days past due, you know, even though they're talking about a second round of stimulus checks and other proposals that they're saying, it's still not to where it will get to them fast enough, you know, and because all these places are closed and they're actually prolonging the shutdown, all these numbers are going to get worse. All right, so if you're a homeowner and you're watching this and you're having a hard time and you don't know what to do, this next information is going to be very, very important. Pay attention. Here it is. Mortgages backed by Freddie Mac that were at least 30 days past due increased by 232,997 from the end of March to April. The share of delinquency mortgages increased to 3.4% from 0.87% in March. If you can't make your mortgage payment, immediately call your mortgage service to request forbearance or other options, Subco said. Most, if not all lenders, have programs in place right now to assist you, and forbearance may be an option as well, Subco said. As a result of the CARES Act, borrowers can request forbearance up to a year if their loan is backed by a federal agency and they are facing a pandemic-related hardship. It's important for borrowers to fully educate themselves on both new regulations and options their lenders provide. Delinquencies are probably happening because people assume they can automatically skip a payment, said Todd Jones, president of mortgage at Paramount Bank, and didn't have to talk to their servicer about forbearance. You know, that last piece of information is really, really important if you're experiencing a lot of trouble right now. You know, call up and ask them if they can you know, what they can do for you, you know, because you're going through this pandemic. You know, 40% of people that were low income, that were affected by this. So, you know, don't skip your payment. Talk to them and see what you can do. Now, that's for mortgage people. As far as landlords go, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what you can do in that situation. But you can go ahead and prepare right now for a time where you could possibly be evicted, which sounds horrible, I understand. But you need to go ahead and plan now for things to come. You know, that's the whole purpose of preparing. And that's one of them, at least in this, what is happening today. You know, real life, that's happening for a lot of people throughout the United States. So my next headline also shows how bad the economy is. Wave of COVID-19 bankruptcies pose next threat to U.S. economy. This from yahoo.com. So really the article only went into talking about big corporations, and it didn't really focus on the small businesses. But the majority of the bankruptcies are probably going to come from small businesses. Yes, the airline industry is going under, but they're being bailed out. As far as I know, JCPenney, I think it is, either JCPenney or Macy's. I don't know. I'm sorry, I blank out right now. But they're closing 200 stores, and as far as I know, it's going to be permanent. So all those people are going to lose their jobs. You know, Sears, they close a lot of their businesses too. And there's restaurants that are never going to reopen again. So things are going from bad to worst. All right. So then that leaves people in a state of desperation, you know, because they don't have a job anymore. There's no income coming in. They're about to lose their house. They're about to lose their apartment. They're about to lose their car. Things are getting pretty desperate. All right, so what's the government going to do about that? Here's that next headline. Payday. New bill could give Americans 2,000 monthly coronavirus stimulus checks for up to 90 days after pandemic. This from thesun.com. 3 Democratic senators have pitched the monthly Economic Crisis Support Act, which will be released on Friday, Politico reported. The act is being pitched by Senator Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, and Ed Markey. If legislation is passed, Americans who make less than $120,000 will receive a monthly check of $2,000. Married couples file their taxes together will receive $4,000, and $2,000 would be provided for each child up to 3. Harris told Politico that the bill is a reflection that Congress's previous efforts were not nearly enough to meet the needs for this historic crisis. Markey told the outlet that the checks would be the most direct and efficient mechanism to delivering economic relief and those most vulnerable. Congress has a responsibility to make sure that every working class household in America receives a $2,000 emergency payment a month for each family member, Sanders added. All right, so all that sounds wonderful, right? I mean, to some people, it's going to be like the best thing that ever happened. But that is going to just make things worse down the road. All right. Just think about it. $4,000 for a married couple plus $2,000 for, $2,000 per child up to 3 children. All that together is $10,000 a month. The government is going to give the average American $10,000 a month to live on. And they're saying as long as the pandemic lasts, there's, the whole concept of a year has, been gone now. And up to 90 days after they declare that the pandemic is done, which up to what they're talking about now, they're talking about that it's going to be when they have a vaccine. So if you follow that train of thought, they have been saying that it could take up to 18 months to come up with a vaccine. Even though Trump said today that he would make sure that by the end of the year, every American would be vaccinated with this new vaccine that they're coming up. But let's just say it lasts another year. All right, that would be 12 months of payments, for people who make $120,000 and less. And then 90 days after that. So that is a long time for the government to just print money out of thin air. And like I said before, if it wasn't for the Federal Reserve being the United States and the United States being the global currency, what's it called? The reserve currency. A lot of this that we're doing right now, would be able to do it today. So, like I've said, if your life has not been impacted that much, it's because there's a lot of people working very, very hard for things to be as normal as possible. That's why they keep bailing everybody out. And at the end of the day, it's gonna make things a lot worse. The fall is gonna be harder on everyone than later down the road than it would happen right now. So with all of that, here's my next headline. Federal debt tops $25 trillion for the first time, jumped $1 trillion in just 28 days. This from CNSnews.com. The debt of the federal government topped $25 trillion for the first time on Tuesday, when it climbed from $24.9 trillion to $25 trillion, according to data released by the Treasury Department. The federal debt had topped $24 trillion for the first time on April 7, when it rose from $23.9 to $24 trillion. Thus, the federal debt increased by more than $1 trillion in just 28 days. In its annual report to Congress on the nation's fiscal health, which was published in March, the Government Accountability Office said the federal government's fiscal path is unsustainable. This situation, in which debt grows faster than GDP, means that current federal fiscal path is unsustainable, GAO concluded. All right, so just think about that. In just 28 days, we spent $1 trillion. And $1 trillion is a lot of money. All right, you know that. What could you do with $1 trillion, right? We will all go crazy. But that $25 trillion number does not include what they're talking about passing here soon. Another $3 trillion that Nancy Pelosi had said that she's going to send people another $1,200 round, of stimulus check. Plus, if they pass Kamala Harris and Sanders and the other congressman, I can't remember his name, if they pass that one where there's $10,000 a month for American families for up to however long it takes, and then 3 months after that, that $25 trillion is going to be long gone by the time we get to the end of this, if that passes, which Nancy Pelosi's second round looks like it's going to pass, and that's what they're talking about. I know there's a lot of people who need it right now, but I'm telling you, if things continue the same way, they're going to end up the way the Venezuela is right now, and it's going to be worse for everyone. Remember, $400,000 worth for eggs. Will you pay $400,000 for eggs? It could be that way. And Peter Schiff, there's other people who are talking about that all this money printing is just going to create hyperinflation, because now, even if you keep your $100,000 in the bank, the purchasing power of that $100,000 will probably be equivalent to 10 grand, maybe $1,000. Imagine you have $100,000, but you only have the buying power of $100. Now that's when chaos is going to be, in the streets, more than what it is right now. But the point is that if we don't stop what we're doing, then that's where it's going to go. And it looks like there's nothing any one of us can do. They're doing it, and I don't see anybody protesting about that. There's people senators and everybody, they're not coming out and saying that this is insane. At least I have not heard anything about that, about them stopping what they're doing. So, anyways, I'm going to finish with this headline. Spending and deficit sets all-time records. Fed spends $3.3 trillion through April while running $1.48 trillion deficit. This from CNSnews.com. All right, just off the headline, the deficit is $1.48 trillion, and they're already spent $3.3 trillion in April, and they're not counting what they're planning to spend in May, which is another $3 trillion. So in the span of 2 months, they're going to spend over $6 trillion. That should make you very angry because they're stealing your purchasing power. So I hope you're paying attention and you're getting prepared. On the next video, we're going to get very deep in how you should prepare, what you should do, especially if you're starting off and you don't know what to do. So again, my name is Jose Prado, and remember, always ready.
The Man-Made Survival Show.